Elon Musk thought he was walking into a routine television interview. By the time he was done, the entire studio sat in stunned silence. Elon Musk wasn't new to interviews. He had faced tough questions before, handled hostile debates, and stood his ground in conversations designed to shake him. But something about this one felt different. He first heard about the interview a week ago, an invitation from a high-profile news program. Not just any program, but one known for its confrontational style. The kind where guests weren't just questioned, but cornered. The host, a seasoned journalist with decades in the industry, had a reputation for belittling guests, especially those who didn't fit his worldview. Elon had done his research. The journalist, Richard Caldwell, was a veteran in the industry. He had built his career on his sharp tongue and his ability to expose guests who, in his eyes, weren't qualified to sit across from him. His strategy was simple: provoke, discredit, and, if necessary, humiliate. It wasn't about conversation. It was about control. And tonight, Elon Musk was his target. Musk knew exactly what was coming. Critics often dismissed him as reckless, too ambitious, or even unqualified despite his vast achievements. The narrative was predictable, but he had no intention of playing into it. From the moment he arrived at the studio, he felt the atmosphere shift, the unspoken condescension. The producer, a man in his mid-50s, greeted him with a thin smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The assistant, a younger woman, offered a hesitant nod, but avoided eye contact. It was clear he wasn't expected to win this exchange. Musk sat in the makeup chair, barely listening as the stylist brushed powder over his face. He could hear Caldwell's distinct voice wrapping up his current segment. The host's tone was measured, confident, the voice of a man who had spent years controlling the conversation. The stylist adjusted the collar of Musk's blazer. "You ready?" Musk met his reflection in the mirror. "Always." Minutes later, he was led into the studio. The lights were blinding, the air-conditioned room unnaturally cold. The audience, composed mostly of journalists and industry insiders, sat beyond the cameras, silent, waiting. Caldwell was already in his chair, legs crossed, a practiced smile on his face. The kind of smile that wasn't meant to welcome, but to challenge. His fingers drummed against the desk as Musk took his seat. "Elon Musk," Caldwell said, stretching out his name as if tasting it for the first time. "Welcome to the show." Musk nodded. "Thanks for having me." Caldwell's eyes flickered, scanning him as if assessing how much resistance he'd put up. He leaned forward slightly, his smirk barely concealed. "You've made quite a name for yourself in a short time. Some might say too fast for someone with so little experience." Musk held his gaze. "Experience comes from action, not just years," he said evenly. Caldwell let out a short laugh, shaking his head as if amused. "Ah, but isn't that what every young upstart says before realizing they're in over their head?" There it was, the first attempt to make Musk second-guess himself. But Musk had expected this. Caldwell wasn't finished. "Do you really believe you've earned a seat at this table? Or is this just another case of someone trying to skip the hard work and go straight for the spotlight?" The studio tensed. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was a battle. But Musk had never backed down from a fight. He adjusted his posture, meeting Caldwell's gaze without hesitation. "I don't believe success has a set timeline," he said. "If someone is competent, driven, and prepared, why should they have to wait their turn?" Caldwell smirked. "That's the thing about younger generations, always in a rush. You talk about preparation, but let's be honest, experience matters. Many would argue that you haven't paid your dues." Musk could hear the faint chuckle from someone off camera. They were expecting him to stumble. He didn't. The idea of paying dues is often used to keep people in their place, he said. What exactly are we talking about? A waiting period? An arbitrary number of years before someone's ideas matter? Because the world doesn't work that way anymore. Caldwell's smirk twitched. He had expected a rehearsed response, something polished but predictable. Instead, Musk had given him something he couldn't immediately dismiss. The audience leaned in. Caldwell took a slow breath. "Let's acknowledge the elephant in the room," he said, shifting tactics. "The world has changed. We live in an era where opinions are thrown around carelessly. Do you think it's possible that your confidence comes from the fact that, up until now, no one has really challenged you?" Musk let the silence stretch. He could see where Caldwell was steering this, undermine his credibility, paint him as a product of the digital age rather than someone who had earned his place. "I think people confuse confidence with arrogance," Musk said. "I've been challenged plenty, but being questioned by people who assume they already know better? That's not a real challenge. That's gatekeeping." Caldwell blinked. Musk continued. "The real test isn't whether someone can challenge me. It's whether, when they do, I hold up under pressure." Caldwell exhaled through his nose. He had expected Musk to flinch, to scramble for a defense. Instead, he was meeting him head-on. For the first time, Caldwell had nothing to say. The silence stretched. The cameras captured everything. Caldwell, shifting uncomfortably. Musk, steady as ever. The balance of power had shifted. Caldwell exhaled slowly, nodding slightly, acknowledging the moment. "Well," Caldwell finally said, his voice carefully controlled. "That's certainly one way to look at it." Musk just smiled. The moment the cameras cut, the energy in the studio shifted. The tension didn't disappear. It changed. Producers whispered. A junior assistant hesitated before stepping forward. "That was really something." Musk glanced at her and smiled. "Yeah, it was." Outside, his phone buzzed, notifications exploding. Clips of the interview were already circulating. People were talking. And that was the lesson. The truth is, people will always question you. Not because you're wrong, but because you're different. Because you don't fit their mold. Because you didn't wait for them to approve of you before deciding to take up space. And when that happens, you have two choices. You can shrink, or you can stand your ground. Because at the end of the day, people respect what they can't shake. And Elon Musk? He left that studio unshaken.